Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hey guys, today we're going to learn about how God is enough. So whenever we say, or whenever we point at you, you say,
Enough.
enough.
Who remembers what we talked about last week in the Big God story? God brought Joseph through many difficult situations because he had a big plan for his life. Carrie, will you read Genesis 50, verse 20?
Yeah, totally. What did you say?
Genesis 50, verse 20.
You got a page for me?
No.
Oh, okay. Genesis what? 50 verse 20?
Uh-huh.
Okay, totally got this. Genesis 50 verse 20. Yep, that's right. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives.
In fact, God planned to use Joseph to save many lives. We heard how God kept his promises and provided for his people. He provided enough to save the family line of the promised Redeemer.
You forgot to point at us.
For about 400 years, the Israelites cried out to God for freedom from slavery. So God raised up a man named Moses.
Moses, that's right.
To help free them. Even after they'd been freed, the Israelites found themselves being chased by the Egyptian army. God had so much more for his people, so he divided the Red Sea so they could cross the sea and escape from the army. Then God closed the sea and washed the Egyptian army away.
I can't swim.
Again, God provided
enough
to care for his people. In the wilderness, God took care of his people. He made a covenant or everlasting promise to be their God and make them his people. He gave them the 10 Commandments to guide their lives and help them be set apart for him as his own people. Carrie, read Exodus 20.
I'm on again. Exodus 20. Got this.
Verse 2 and 3.
Exodus 20, verse 2 and 3. Excuse me. Exodus 20, verse 2 and 3. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me.
This was the very first commandment and very important. The Israelites had lived in Egypt for 400 years, and the Egyptians worshipped many false gods. But these false gods couldn't save them from the plagues. They couldn't divide the seas. They had no power. They were not
enough.
These false gods weren't just powerless. They couldn't be in relationship with the people who worshiped them. God wanted so much more for the Israelites. He longed to be in relationship with his people. He led his people to the promised land, a place where they could freely worship the one true God. He'd promised to make them his special people. He did this to show the world the love relationship between God and his people. The Israelites were so completely blessed to have the God of the universe choose them as his holy people.
Hang on one sec. Hello? Hello. Yeah, I'm going to have to call you back. I'm kind of teaching some kids about God right now, okay? Okay, thanks. Bye-bye. Sorry about that.
He began to transform them into his holy people. He required that his people recognize no other God, especially gods of silver or gods of gold
Or cell
they
phones.
made with their own hands. This is the kind of thing the Egyptian people did, and God wanted his people to be different and set apart. He wanted them to understand that he is
enough.
They didn't need anything more. When the earthly leader, Moses, went to be with God on the mountain for 40 days, the Bible says God came upon the mountain in the form of a dense cloud and fire. The people lost their confidence. Moses was gone for too long, and they feared God wasn't
enough
for them. The mountain was smoking. It shook as if there was a mighty earthquake. This scared the Israelite people. In their fear, they did exactly what God commanded them not to do. They gathered up their gold jewelry, melted it down, and formed it into the image of a calf they could worship.
Seriously? That's kind of weird.
Well, this might seem kind of weird. Remember, the Israelites were used to seeing the Egyptians worship false gods. That was familiar to them, but this grieved God's heart. In fact, God was so upset that his people had disobeyed his first law that he wanted to just start over with new people. But Moses asked God to spare the people he'd brought out of Egypt, the people who were the children of Abraham, the man whom he'd made an everlasting promise. God heard Moses' prayer, and in his mercy did not destroy the Israelites. Yet they still faced consequences for their actions. When Moses came down the mountain and saw that the Israelites were doing, he threw down the tablets on which the 10 Commandments were written. Then he took the calf they had made and burned it in the fire. He poured the ashes in water and made the Israelites drink it.
Ew.
Because of Moses' actions and his anger, the Israelites realized the great sin they had committed, and they repented or turned away from their sins. God rewrote the 10 Commandments on new tablets. Once again, he promised his presence would go with them into the promised land. Next week, we'll hear more about their journey in the wilderness and how God is in control of everything. This part of the big God story is a sad reminder of how easy it can be to not trust God when things get hard. God called his people to worship him, the one true God who is
enough
for them. Today, God still calls us to worship him only. Though it may be difficult to worship a God whom we can't see or touch, and choose God over everything else, we know God is
enough.
We can trust him. This means living life with God is so much better than living life any other way. As we put our faith in God, we learn what it means to trust and obey him, even when it's hard. No matter what we face, he is with us. God will give us everything we need to live a life of faith. Through difficult times, we can learn to depend on him.